Hey everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations, and you're with Simon today. So today's video, we are going to look at the full moon in Pisces, and this is for the 10th and 11th of September 2022. Hope you guys are well, and you're fairly okay considering the nature of the transits at the moment. All right. What's the scope of today's conversation? What I want to address today is I want to talk to you about the nature of the astrology at the moment, what kind of the abstract. We'll talk a little bit about the abstract, what these archetypes that we have currently circulating in the sky, how do they work for us, how they're materializing themselves. I'm going to go and look at the charts. I'm going to take the abstract and the charts and synthesize them together so you see how these two themes are working, and I will then talk a little bit about what I feel is the message from this full moon in Pisces. Okay, so that's kind of the trajectory today. That's what I want to take you on, and hopefully through that process you'll find moments of clarity, some form of insight. Maybe you'll see something within your own life, what I've been talking about today, and that helps you shift something within you. Okay, all right, so if you're new to the channel, what I do is I take astrology, human design, understand the way that these two systems are reflecting our evolutionary changes, and I try to facilitate some form of integration into your life. Like, how does this reflect the evolutionary potential? How can we ground these energies into our reality? And how can we best move forward using the potential that's available for us when we go through these transits? So that's what I do, and hopefully if you're new to the channel, like I said, you start to be able to get the value from what I'm sharing. Okay, so I want to address something that has to do with the Virgo archetype, or is a correlation to the Virgo archetype, that is probably not necessarily spoken about greatly or in great detail when it comes to looking at Virgo in a person's birth chart or in your own personal birth chart. Okay, so I did a video just recently with Venus in Virgo. I highly encourage you to go check that out. You'll see that there is a link in the comment section for that, where I talked very briefly about the collective at the moment healing this underlying sense of perfectionism. Okay, and that this had to do with an abandonment trauma that we carry, like abandonment response, and therefore creating this psychological and emotional behavior in which perfectionism materializes out of. And I'm talking specifically about how the collective, I'm watching how the collective, through me, through other people, are beginning to heal these psychological and emotional states that are very much associated with the Virgo archetype. Okay, so if you have moon in Virgo, sun in Virgo, planets in Virgo, for instance, I'm sure you'll probably relate to this, even if you've got the South Node in the 6th house or any planets in the 6th house. So I want to speak about this first within the context, because for any of you that have got, planets here, you're going to be affected by this full moon's energy, as well as the new moon, plus with Venus moving through. So Pete Walker did a really good article where he talked about what is called the inner critic, and I can link that in the description as well. What he's referring to here is a psychological defense mechanism that comes out when we've been exposed to experiences where betrayal or abandonment or emotional neglect has taken place when we're growing up. And as a kind of adaptation, a response to these parental failings, betrayals, abandonments, particularly with parents, right? Mom didn't, for instance, see you or recognize you in a way that you needed it. These adaptations, these psychological defense mechanisms would start to show up, and they'd be called, in this case, it would be the inner critic, which is a psychological messaging that you have about yourself, that you internalize as some form of failure, you're not good enough, the reason why people don't like you is because of this. And most importantly, a perfectionist personality structure that shows up that you will only do things if it's perfect, or if it's not perfect, why bother? And that you have to get everything right the first time. And a lot of anxiety and nervousness materializes out of this. Again, go and look at the PDF or the article that's in the comment section. You'll see that I talk about this, or he writes about this in depth. And this is an important thing that everybody needs to, if you relate to this and resonate with this, needs to address, because it prevents you from accessing true authenticity. It prevents you from being free and real with yourself and with your life. And it also prevents you from actually emotionally growing, because you're afraid to take a leap. You're afraid to do the thing that you love. You're afraid to try something new, because there's an underlying sense of, what happens if I fail? What happens if I get it wrong? What happens if somebody looks at me and says, you idiot? What happens where, whatever it is. But there's an internalized message that says, I'd love to do a YouTube channel and talk about my favorite passions and insights, but I don't, because what happens if I do it wrong? Yeah, as an example. And so people don't actually actualize themselves. They don't follow their passions. They don't follow the thing that they love or do in their life, because this underlying psychological judgment of inferiority. And it's important to note, and this is a teaching that is related to Virgo and that everybody should adopt into their life, is Virgo is an archetype that teaches us about the step-by-step process of something, as opposed to the perfectionism of it. So it's, what do I need to do as a step-by-step that I can engage in, that I can try, that teaches me how to become better at it. So you go, hey, bake me a chocolate cake, and you've never baked a chocolate cake in your life before. You're never going to get it right the first time, like somebody that's been doing it for, say, years, But it shouldn't stop you from trying, because each moment, each attempt, each experience should be met with a curiosity to say, okay, I'm learning how to do this. This is the first time I did this, and now I'm getting a bit more familiar, and I grow, right? So there's a kind of message here that I want to put across that is very much linked with this full moon, in the sense of what types of planetary archetypes facilitate or support or bring forward a rewiring of the language that you can use to support you in achieving things and doing things that you wish you want to do within your life. And that the perfectionist attack of, I should do it perfectly the first time, needs to be broken down, because what's actually beneath the surface is an underlying sense that if I get it wrong and somebody judges me, I don't like that feeling of judgment. So I want to alleviate myself of that. I don't want to experience that. I don't want to feel that feeling of insecurity. And so therefore I'll project a perfectionist. If I do it right the first time, then I'll get that adoration. I'll get that motherly love that comes to me. And that's a deep psychological kind of messaging that happens there. It's like, it's an attraction. It's like a love dynamic. I can be loved. I can be appreciated. And that's something that's important for us as human beings, to have these feelings of appreciation and being loved and accepted. But it's also there to protect you from having that rejection take place. So it's a really potent and powerful way of being able to start addressing and freeing yourselves of the perfectionist attack, but at the same time also addressing the underlying feeling that comes along with, needing admiration, needing some form of support or ability to say, hey, good job, like, congratulations on that, like, you tried, the value is in the effort as opposed to the perfection. Okay, all right. So in today's conversation, when we look at the charts, we're at a point within the collective cycle where there's big changes that are taking place with Pluto and Capricorn. We know this. We've been living through it since 2008. The way that society has been structured together, has been ordered, how things interact with each other, are all essentially being all the vulnerabilities Pluto is revealing. So Pluto moves through Capricorn and it says, hey, by the way, here's what's no longer working anymore. Here's what's vulnerable. Here's what's archaic or outdated. Or my favorite word that I like to use is senescent, right? It has reached a phase of old age. And so when you take new energetic frequency or a layer of energy and you put it on top of this senescent structure, it starts to apply pressure and it starts to wobble. And so we are emotionally and psychologically moving through a period of time in which that structural reality that is our society, that is our governmental structures, that is our laws, it's the way that we have structured our houses, the way that our roads work, the way that we do trade, all of these things are all coming under attention, right? And what is the threat is the realization of the vulnerability, because they are no longer facilitating the strength that they had. So when you come over to the energy today, this new moon and this full moon energy, what you see is an interesting dynamic where we're going to be very sensitive to the challenges that we may experience in our lives, right? The circumstances that each and every one of us may find ourselves in, and how those circumstances can feel very oppressive. You can feel over like burdened by the heaviness of the challenges that society faces and us as individuals face, because they are interconnected. And so this energy with Pisces holds a deep underlying sense of despair, hopelessness, a feeling of, is this going to ever end? These experiences, these overbearing dynamics are too much. And a big part of that is leading to an internal pressure of like, gosh, like how do we navigate this going forward? How do we deal with the pressures of the world impending on us, with energy prices and war? And they've always been around in different ways, but this type of, when you're moving in the realms of Virgo Pisces, we're moving in the realms of how we relate to these feelings and these experiences and these scenarios through this lens of like despair, okay? A sense of feeling like, wow, the world is really so intense and it's just bearing down on me. I feel oppressed, right? I feel oppressed in these dynamics. And it's a struggle. It's a deep struggle in the process. And so I'll look at the chart over here and I'll show you what I mean by this. A very big part of this type of energy that is around right now, especially with Mercury turning retrograde or moving into its retrograde form, or we experience it as retrograde, and Mars in Gemini at the moment, right? We've got Venus now in Virgo and the Sun's there in Virgo. The holistic expression of the current energy at the moment, on one layer, has this deep reverberating, okay, breaking down of social structures and the realization of our attachments to them and the vulnerabilities that we are faced with. Okay, so when we think about our lives, we wake up in the morning and there's a certain routine, there's a certain expectation, there's a certain way in which we interact with our lives that we don't see the vulnerabilities. What we see is, this is my morning coffee, this is how I need to get to work, this is my roles that I need to play for a project I'm doing, or whatever that may be. We see that and we interact with that because that is our lives. But we don't see the invisible realm that holds those things together. And that this Saturn in Aquarius on the South and North node in Taurus and Scorpio, that ball, right, is being, that invisible thing that holds those things together is being exposed. We're seeing the vulnerability that is held within the framework of structure. And then you take this Virgo Pisces axis coming in, and what we're sensitive to as we interact with this bigger realm is our relationship to how it can feel like it's meaningless, like it's all just going to go there, and what's the point? And there's a kind of futility, and there's also a sense of despair. Like, how are we going to break through these things? And then you have, through this toughness, you have this Mars in Gemini, Mercury retrograde theme coming up, and eventually there's going to be solar eclipse and lunar eclipses towards the end of November, October and beginning of November, where we're going to be exposed to a very strong energetic cycle in which what I'm talking about today will become very paramount in our lives. We will see how much work we have done over the last 6 months come to fruition. We'll see it. And what I'm sharing with you here is that part of that work, part of being able to work with the energy right now so that when those eclipses come, you can be in a very good position, is to start looking at the reframing. Okay, so reframing the way that we are interfacing and seeing and experiencing the current shift and changes that are taking place in our world right now. And there's a sense of grace that needs to be embraced. There's a sense of observing these changes as nothing like, oh my God, we need to control it, we need to change, but more of these are occurrences that are taking a course. They are occurring, they're emerging out of us. These things are breaking down as we are shifting internally within ourselves. And as less of these things have meaning for us, we are also left with the potential and the curiosity and the sense of moving forward and empowering ourselves in new ways. So we can look at the past and we can feel deeply oppressed by the way that things are collapsing, but we can also look at the potential and the possibility of what is awakening internally within the collective spirit for you individually, and also the potential of what is emerging as a new structure, right? And that structure doesn't really have any form per se. That's the way I see it. I don't think it has any form. We're just kind of in this weird transitionary moment where the thing that matters the most is actually being able to check in with what is held within this sphere and what is coming out of you and what is feeling that is being pulled out of you. And what I mean by that is accepting that these circumstances and changes are materializing in ways to force a movement in a different direction, to look at alternative ways to solve the problems that we face collectively and of course individually. And this word of collective is a very important word for me, especially in the context of this full moon, because and I'm not sure how many of you have watched the last videos that I've done, but you'll know that the planetary nodes of Neptune have been deeply impacted and are highlighted. Right, Saturn was on the planetary node, the south node of Neptune, and Venus was on the north node of Neptune. Planetary nodes are deep memory fields that reflect the collective's journey. So imagine that we had like the whole entire collective going on a journey, and what we would all share as a memory of experiences and events that have taken place, like COVID, for instance, being a great example. Everybody has a memory of it. It's held within the backdrop. You just need to talk about it and it comes to the forefront. But it's not always there. It's in the peripherals. That's the planetary nodes, peripheral memory field. When planets are activating these planetary nodes, stuff comes to the surface. So this is a collective story we are addressing, we are dealing with. We're all part of it. And one of the big scopes that we're all part of is this perfectionist trauma that I was referring to. Another one is how do we actually address internally within each of us the suffering that comes along with what it means to be human. Okay? The suffering, what comes along with being human. Each and every one of us carries with us a story, carries with us a memory field, carries with us experiences. Do we frame our experiences through a deep feeling of, why did this happen to me? I'm a victim to it. This is my fault. I deserve to suffer. I'm going to blame people, as an example. Do we just stay stuck in that process? Or during that healing experience, we understand these things have occurred to us, like Dr. Garba Matea talks about. Address the realization that trauma happened to us. It's inside with us. but we don't need to be recreating it, in the sense of identifying these experiences internally within us, these disempowered spaces, these suffering journeys that we've gone on, as that's who we are. There's an ability to reshape and change the narrative. And this energy right now is facilitating the beginning of reframing our experiences, so that there is wisdom that can be gained from our grief. There's purpose that can be extracted from our situations, like to share, for instance, to share your investigation of how you healed yourself with others, to help give back to the collective, to help other people feel that there is a possibility to come out of the darkness of experiences that have been intense, that have been difficult. It's a reframe, and the reframe comes through a deep ability to see your power in the situation. And it may not it's not clear straight away. It's not like, oh wow, I can see the power in my suffering. No, I mean more in the sense that if we turn it around and we look at that which has been what we have experienced and what those vulnerabilities have brought us, and we also address that which we can improve within us, right? We can help heal within yourself and be able to put yourself in a position where you can live your life again in a way that has purpose or meaning. It doesn't have to be those things. It can be just simply being able to come out of a space of suffering with something that you have gathered, you've gotten from it. But the focus is reframing it, accepting some of the situations and circumstances with what they are, and then moving forward with those things, and investigating, being curious, trying to expose yourself to the different sides of how something can materialize in one's life. Because the fixation on the oppression can really create a deep futility of like, it's pointless. This happened to me, I'm doomed. It's not the case. Okay. So let's look at the charts that I have on the screen, and I want to show you what I've been talking about here, how it's materializing in the actual astrology charts. Okie dokie. So here we have the chart of the full moon itself, and there are red lines which correlate to Saturn and the nodes. And remember earlier I talked about the background, like energy, the big circle of, and the context of what is occurring. And again, the south node is in Scorpio there, you can see it. The north node is situated in Taurus, right by the 7 o'clock position with Uranus. And then you can see Saturn there in Aquarius. This has been the backdrop. This is what I've been talking about. This is what has been reverberating in the collective. And this peripheral energy is what is bringing to our attention issues and themes of resources and realization of our vulnerabilities as human beings. Just the fact that you come onto this earth itself and your body is vulnerable, right? It's not protected. You don't have a protective coating on it that if you were stung by bees, for instance, or if you climbed a tree and the tree's bark was rough, for instance, it's gonna affect your skin. Like, we're vulnerable in many ways, and that vulnerability leads us to seek empowerment, to seek defensiveness, to seek protection, right? Other people are vulnerable as well, and this is preyed on in many ways. Like, the vulnerability of people is a very big part of this energy, a sacrifice. And this is a kind of core message here, is that if you can be easily manipulated if you do not see your own power, if you do not see your own assets, do not see your own skill sets, do not see your own internalized self-reliance. You're dependent. That's this background frequency. The reason why I put the blue line over there with the sun is a recognition of the crisis, the potential awareness of how these attachments are formed in our lives. There's an ability to see this at a very sensitive level, the details of these experiences. This is the background energy. So if we look at the second chart over here, you can see the moon sitting there next to Neptune. The moon is in direct opposition to the sun, 16 degrees, and this is the Virgo-Pisces axis. And suffering is very much associated, and struggle is very much associated with the Virgo-Pisces axis, because there's an underlying feeling of disempowerment. Paradoxically, conversely, this is not true for everyone. There are many people out there that have been able to internalize their sense of purpose and passion and direction in many ways, and feel a sense of alignment, a sense of flow, a sense of conscious recognition of one's own being and living in that way, right? Both sides of this polarity exist. But this energy over here, this Virgo-Pisces opposition, speaks to, addresses, brings into focus our relationship to these attachments. And do we feel oppressed by them, or do we feel that we can dissolve our attachments and we can internalize power and then be able to integrate into our lives, self-directed, self-conscious, some form of higher meaning? That's the potential that sits here. If you look, the sun at 17 degrees of Virgo in relationship to Saturn, this aspect between Saturn and the sun is, from how I see it, is when shock takes place in our lives, it creates a crisis. And that shock sends a deep internal process going along. And that can oftentimes feel like chaos. So if you notice here, Saturn, Chiron, and the sun are in a finger of God aspect. And here you have the moon coming into the boomerang point, the middle point over here, triggering this crisis aspect. So one of the ways this materializes in the collective at the moment is the passing of the Queen in the UK, right? Monarch. There's a change in the guard. There's a change in the state's process. People are mourning that process, right? Their attachments to the idea of what she represented, the image that she held in the collective psyche. This is changing. Some of the interesting things as well that's come about is how this shift is going to materialize in the collective. It's just one example. But this aspect between the sun and Chiron and Saturn and the moon is a trigger point that initiates a shift away from suffering, away from struggle, not as something that is bad, but something that cannot be dwelled upon. It must be transcended through seeking the silver lining in the process. Different to spiritual bypassing, which is, oh no, it's all good. No, it's finding meaning in that suffering, but also realizing that staying in it and dwelling in it just feels like everybody is doing this to you, and that's externalizing your power, basically. Okay. So lastly, on this chart over here, you see Mercury and Jupiter in an opposition. Whenever Mercury and Jupiter are in opposition, there's a binary between the left brain thinking and the right brain thinking. Both of these archetypes are in retrograde form. So there's a huge intuitive stream that is present here at the moment. When Jupiter's retrograde and Mercury's retrograde, both of the streams of intellectual and collective thinking, as well as the way that we form our intuition and gather intuition and create insights, they are inward. And so right now there's a powerful opportunity to rewrite philosophical structures as well as mental definitions. And the reason why Mars comes in here alongside Chiron is the potential is to show that there is a new potential. There's a reframing. It's looking outside of the box, taking a direction, being curious, learning to explore outside of these definitions and roles and structures that we've played, right? So there's an acceptance here Are you empowered, or do you choose to remain disempowered, disabled? And it comes through the archetype of acceptance, that this is where I'm at. And then that leads to investigation, curiosity, and exploration, and learning more and growing in that way. Okay. All right, so the message of the full moon that I want to bring to you is that this is an energy where there's an incredible potency to begin exploring, accepting, processing the events in our lives as things that have happened to us, yes. That there is a opportunity to begin addressing them and realizing them, that they can be changed. Not the events, the way that we have experienced them or internalized them or addressed them. And that if we put ourselves in a position of acceptance and then ask ourselves, how can I empower myself from this process? This is something that really moves forward in a way in our lives. And it's important to keep it simple. Do not try to take on the world's challenges. It's not possible unless you have a team of loads of people who've got the same vision and that you're on that trajectory, power. But start applying this type of thinking to fixing the world's economy or any of the things. It's not going to work because it's too big. You start with you. Start with your inner connection to yourself. Start into the inner connection and the drive that is in your life right now. And start allowing this energy to notice the subtle negative thinking, the perfectionist attack, the subtle punitive message that says you will fail or you're not good enough. And start reshaping the landscape and starting to say to yourself, hey, this is what I'd like to achieve, and I believe in myself, and I can move forward and have a conversation that's healthy. Start to notice where there is negativity, and there's no need to judge it. It's just need to observe it, and then to replace it with a reinforcement. So, looking at something and saying, I'm bad at this, say, how can I improve it? What do I need? Do I need to talk to somebody? Do I need some more information? How do I support myself in the process? Reshaping the way that we interact with life and our relationship to ourselves, so that we can free from oppressive ways of experiencing life, so it doesn't feel so intense. Okay. All right, my friends. So like and subscribe to the video if you thought this was valuable. Write to me in the comments if you've got questions for me. If you're processing this, tell me where you're at. Write in the comments, okay? Because there's always opportunities for other people to feel that they're not alone, and I can always answer one or two questions if you've got one there as well, okay? All right, my friends, have a fantastic full moon, and until the next video, take care. Bye-bye. Hey guys, thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to see more of my content, make sure to click on the videos that are on the screen right now. If you haven't yet subscribed, make sure you subscribe. And if you want to learn more about how you can work with me, make sure to check the description of the video. Okay? Have an awesome day.